these things. And so we're going to dive into this controversial topic, the mystery of false apostles. And so, John, when we consider that Judas Iscariot was actually one of the 12 apostles, it shouldn't be hard to believe that Satan would have an inside man in other aspects of the church. And he did. Mm-hmm. And this even included infiltrating the church of the first century. We're talking about, after they replaced Judas, there were 12 apostles again. And then later you had Paul and Barnabas and you had others. But you had problems in the church. And I don't think people realize that they crept in very sneakily. So we're going to talk about that today because we want to ask, is it possible that when Paul spoke of false apostles, and we're going to read a verse about that in just a moment, that he was speaking about people that he knew and that were prominent figures in the Bible? And the other question is, did false apostles take over the church at Jerusalem even before Peter died? Because, he was given charge of the church. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into who are these mysterious false apostles. And as we mentioned just a couple of episodes ago, when we talked about the Queen of Heaven deception, which was episode 226, there are false apostles today running around trying to convince us that fallen angels and demons are actually benevolent extraterrestrials. And we discussed that in that episode. So really, these false apostles have been around from the beginning. And we see that when Paul mentioned them in 2 Corinthians 11. I'm going to start reading in verse 13, where he says, he's speaking of some people. He says, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." So there were false apostles, and we read that passage and you think, well, maybe he's just being, he's using just rhetoric to say that these are bad guys. But no, the Bible doesn't do that. He's calling them out for what they truly are, which means there were some people claiming to be apostles who truly were false. And that's kind of hard to settle in, So what's really interesting is there was a church that encountered them and had to deal with them. And John, the Apostle John, mentions them in the book of Revelation. And of course, it starts out with Jesus writing to the 7 angels of the 7 churches. And the very first church, which is Ephesus, in chapter 2, verse 1, he says, "Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, These things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil, and thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars." So even in John's time, and allegedly he wrote the Revelation late in the first century, even as late as 90-something AD, we're told, we had a church that was being addressed who had to deal with false apostles. Now, we don't know when they existed and when they had to try them, but they found them to be liars.